Yes, ready.
Okay, I call to order May 13th, 2025 URA budget meeting. Be honest, maybe the meeting was not on the budget committee or staff, use your microphone, turn off your video. All right, we're going to start off with the election of the chair.
Do roll call? Roll call?
Roll call. Okay, see. Write that down. We need to do roll call.
Chair Lutz,
Here.
Vice Chair McDougall, Member Ross,
Here.
Member Prieden,
You bet.
Member Pellerin,
Here.
Member Smith, Member Mahoney,
Here.
Member Metolius,
Here.
Member Dorst, Member Stockinger.
Here.
Thank you. Now we're going to talk to the election of the chair. All for any nominations for the chair today.
I move to nominate Sarah McDougall as chair of the URA.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other motion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. To be contrary.
Member McDougall, the chair of the committee, and I will take over the meeting. Great, thank you.
Nothing perfect.
Director O'Neill, you have a budget message for us.
I do not. I do. I can have one.
Yeah.
This is the button. Okay.
Well, yes, I do. And I'm happy to present the FY 25-26 budget for the Sisters of Renewal Agency. This is typically where I start to confuse everybody with the explanation of what tax increment financing is and how urban renewal works. I will have to do some of that, just to kind of explain what this budget is and why it exists. But for the new members, think of the Sisters Urban Renewal Agency as a separate but somewhat equal body to the city. Legally, cities in Oregon are allowed to set up urban renewal agencies. You basically have to develop a plan, an urban renewal plan, kind of justify its existence to cure blight within a certain targeted area. There's restrictions on how big that area can be relative to the size of your overall city. And so it's basically a creature of the city, but separate. In Sisters, our urban renewal agency board is the same as our city council, so your elected officials, and then similar to or same as city, the budget committee is 5 appointed members that are at large that serve with the urban renewal agency board members. So we do notice this meeting separately. Some are appointments and elections of the chair to run the meeting, and then we present the budget. And so you'll be adopting a budget for the cities. So what is an urban renewal agency? Like I said, it's based off of an urban renewal plan that the city puts together. It has a lot of stakeholders involved with that, basically to come up with a list of projects and other activities that will enhance our downtown or a certain area within the city. For us, it's our downtown core. This is actually the map of our urban renewal area there in the background. Doesn't get the whole picture, but most of it you can tell there. And that's basically our downtown commercial zone. And so the cities come together to put together this plan with these projects. And for Sisters' case, that was 2003 when the renewal plan and agency was created. Sisters has been fortunate in a lot of ways, both with geography, having the investment in the Western theme in the 70s, having recreational amenities, converting the business from a timber town to tourism and like. And the timing of having an urban renewal agency in 2003, I think, coincides a lot with some of the growth and development that's happened in this town. With the sewer project that was approved by voters around that time. That our agency has been really successful. One of the reasons because of that growth over the last 20 years has come at the perfect time to kind of build up the tax increment in the district to do projects. And the purpose of it, the urban renewal plan, doing these projects is to encourage private investment. Is what happens and how we fund our renewal is that when that plan was established and their agency was put into place, the assessed values in that district that you draw are frozen. That's your frozen base. So that's your assessed value for the frozen base doesn't move. Yeah, that's why it's called the frozen base. And any growth above that frozen base is your tax increment. So, you know, you get the yellow that's orange, that orange line is if there was only that statutory 3% growth occurring in the district. And of course, there's always going to be, you know, reinvestment and remodel and things that are happening, but just for the sake of that scenario where nothing else happens but the 3% growth, that's what your assessed value would look like, is that orange line. So you have the frozen base, you have that 3% growth, which is that theoretical, you know, no development scenario. And then the green line here is the increment. So the assessed value for our renewal district is now close to $45 million. And so that is pretty impressive in terms of, you know, this, especially the takeoff in the last decade of the amount of investment that's happening in our downtown. And I think the agency has to take some credit for that. Again, the reason for our renewal plan and putting together an agency is to help spur private investment in the downtown. And so things like the Cascade streetscape improvements, Main, Hood, First Street Park is a great example of creating a public plaza downtown for farmers markets. You know, even the barn, you know, talks about how that draws people in. Helps encourage private property owners to invest in the town because they don't have to make those improvements. And we've just created a more walkable and pleasant downtown where people come, park, visit, spend their money, and encourage more private development. So a lot of these, this is showing, you know, that growth in their downtown district. Some of this does extend up. So the Sister Senior Living facility is in here too. So some of that big increase here about 5 years ago was when that property came online. So what does that do for us? So having that increment is how you pay for projects. And what that means is in order to do projects with urban renewal, you have to bond it. It's all debt finance. So you take that tax increment, which we now have about $550,000 coming in property taxes, and you finance projects with that. We do, you know, direct finance, direct lending, revenue bonds, things like that. To go into your projects that you've identified in the plan. Here's another look at that chart. Kind of mimics, right, that assessed value growth as it should, because property taxes are based off of assessed values. This is the growth in that tax increment. I think every time that we reassess and do a financial plan for the renewal district, I think it's exceeding what we had originally anticipated. Which is great. And what that does is allow the budget committee and the agency to contemplate completing all the projects in the plan, especially before our timeline of completing or starting the projects by 2030. And so one of the projects that we did this year, one of the tasks that was with the council goal was to look at our financial plan for the district and reassess how much is that remaining maximum indebtedness. So I didn't really mention that as part of your plan, you set out the number of projects you have and the activities and how much that's going to cost and how much you need to issue debt to pay for those projects. The total maximum indebtedness for the district is about 9 million. It was almost 10. Almost 10. We have, so, you know, since 2003, I think the projects I've mentioned, we still have $6.7 million left in maximum indebtedness. So a total project cost basically that we can do over the next 5 years. We're in a great position because not only do we have that remaining maximum indebtedness, we can issue enough debt to basically take advantage of that full maximum indebtedness before 2030, because our tax increment has grown enough. We've had enough downtown development, as a value growth that we can basically finance the type of the 25. But we can basically finance that debt and pay for it with the tax income that we're now collecting. So this task that Joe kind of led with getting some consultant help that do a lot of urban renewal plans and financings, said we can next fiscal year issue up to 4.2 million in new debt to pay for projects in the next year and beyond. So a good position to be in, and so next we want to talk about what projects we're proposing to fund with that.
On that, I'm looking at the district map, and so it appears to me ranger station is part of the urban control agency.
Yeah.
And with the new ranger station, did that add some incremental value?
Does not, because it's public property. So public agencies are exempt from taxes, so it doesn't give you the benefit that private don't. So actually, when you look at this chart, you'll see some dips. And correct me if I'm wrong, but some of those dips are when the city is acquiring or other agencies are acquiring property, and property is actually coming off this tax rolls. Yeah. So you do want to strike this balance when you do an urban renewal plan, which I think Sisters has done pretty well. You don't want to put too many eggs in one basket, meaning build a bunch of parks or acquire a bunch of property and take property off the tax rolls, because you want to grow that assessed value base. I should mention that how urban renewal, how the tax increment is paid for. Your taxes don't go up. So remember that tax bill, that example tax bill I showed, and urban renewal was on there. The other overlapping tax districts, like Sisters Parks and Recreation District, library, fire district, their taxes in the city are reduced proportionately to then create the tax rate for an urban renewal agency. But when we close this district, when we pay off all the debt and we're done, that green line is what they're going to be getting instead of something in between, right? Because we've made all these investments, we've increased the overall value of the district, and so they're all going to be way better off. You just have to be patient.
It's a long game of return on invested yields.
Exactly.
I was just wondering how the district is determined. Who makes that determination as far as that?
Yeah, great question. It usually depends on when you're putting together that plan. You're looking at the projects that you want to accomplish, where they are. I think for our purposes, most of this, if not all, aligns with our downtown commercial district, which is our zoning district in downtown commercial, and what uses are allowed in that area. And kind of anticipating, again, what projects you want to invest in and where those projects might be within the town. So you draw that boundary, and you see that little carve out for Cliff Clements Park is probably strategic there to make it, improvements there. And then also making sure that you're drawing in a big enough boundary to generate enough tax increment, right? If you did it small, which there's a way to do this, and Diane's doing this now, but there is a way to do site-specific urban renewal districts, but generally you want a big enough district that you're going to recoup a big enough return on your investment through that tax growth and assessed value. But that kind of explains why some of those boundaries look that way. It's based on one, kind of assessed values that you're projecting and growing, and two, what projects you can do and where.
This was established in
I know 03.
03. So, when you think about that 22 years ago, the city council and others sat down and said, this is the area of town we want to make improvements in. And what the town looked like. Well, some of the construction you've seen here, of course, didn't exist. And so that was some pretty, I think, important thinking on the part of who the council and city government was at that time. Have the wisdom to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the East Portal property, which is not Gateway Park, and that was included for a very specific reason. And the plan was actually amended to accommodate the acquisition of the city, acquiring that, knowing that the Forest Service was eventually going to do something in that property, and then we gave an opportunity for the city through their agency to acquire them.
Is renewal district locked in until 2030, all the way to the end?
Yeah, so the 2030 deadline is actually an agreement that the board made to the overlapping taxing districts, basically saying we understand the impact that we're having on you through the division of taxes. So we want to put a deadline in terms of how long we're going to keep it open for starting new projects and additionally do that, to give them some sense of certainty that this thing's going to close out at some point and we're going to, reap the benefits.
The district area doesn't change.
No, you could do it through a major plan amendment, but that would involve getting permission from the tax districts.
Which the expansion.
Well, and you can create other, you can have more than one, as long as you're not hitting that threshold of a certain percentage of your overall area, you can have multiple urban renewal areas within the same.
Just a quick comment on what you said earlier. You mentioned the youth portal, that gateway property, little transportation hub is. Bringing that into the urban renewal agency and then acquiring it from the Forest Service did not have an impact on that graph we saw, because it was one public agency sending it to another public agency. And so there was no negative impact to the tax base. As there would have been perhaps with a potential commercial property somewhere else was taken off the roll for public use. So something is important to keep that in mind as we look down the road in the future, that not every acquisition has a negative impact on the funding, but some do.
But it doesn't have a positive impact either, as far as.
Well, exactly. There's two ways of looking at it.
The positive impact would be, we made improvements to that property. And parking and things like that, that
Surrounding areas.
might, yeah, say, oh, that's nice.
Not to the taxing district, so.
Okay, so projects, so in the budget, here's what we're proposing, first of all, Adams Avenue, which. Show you a slide here. So Adams Avenue has been contemplated for a few years now. We actually have 100% design for this project. This was sort of the next major and kind of the last major public improvement project in our renewal plan and in our kind of downtown vision to do again another streetscape improvement to extend our downtown to Adams, bringing some of those treatments that you see, like I said, on Hood and Main, to make this more walkable, street trees, parking. There's kind of the east and the west portions of Adams Avenue, where what is this? Is this the east side, which has more of the parallel parking, which is the pull-in, and then of course the pathways and things like that. So, again, making a very pleasant streetscape where people will be encouraged to park and feel safer walking. A lot of Adams doesn't have sidewalks, especially that big middle section. There's a lot of vacant property along Adams. We know some property owners, some of them own a lot of those parcels. We have heard over the years that because this is basically in our plans, they are required to make these improvements or contribute towards these improvements, which is a barrier to development. And so by putting this investment in building the street, we may see properties actually start to improve and make investments into their property and doing developments because they no longer have to do the streetscape improvements. And also just will be a more pleasant environment and draw more people to that area of town. So this will hopefully spur more of that private investment, but overall just make it more walkable, safer, more parking. And I think Adams just needs some investment. We haven't really done a lot of work there just because we do this project for folks. So
In that particular project, looking at the drawing up here, that extends from the alley up. Because the first part of that street was done as part of Cascade, part of Main. Half of that is part of Main, so those improvements have been made, what to look. So that this actually is not a full block as we might think about it, but it's actually that upper half. So the improvements to the alley are very far.
and I think alleys are slated for improvement too.
Yes, I believe they are. Yeah.
So this is a $3.5 million contribution from the Assistant Urban Renewal Agency. That would be 3.1 million in the next fiscal year, and then we're kind of anticipating the remaining dollars coming in because of the way the construction season works. And again, things could change. We had a 2-year budget, budget. But that's always subject to change, anticipating construction schedules and how much money, we get in as part of the project in one fiscal year or the other. But that's one of the projects, the roundabout art and landscaping project. So you've probably been reading the paper about roundabout art, and where we're at in that process. we're gonna be coming back to the council with different options and having a discussion about path forward on selecting and procuring art for the roundabout, but we still have that carrying over to the budget for renewal. We will be moving forward the landscaping, the majority of the improved landscaping for the whole area, including the roundabout. And then the workforce housing grant that was also awarded to Habitat for Humanity for the same project. To squint, you can see the cottage development that's proposed there at large. And so they applied and were awarded that grant. That's a $400,000 grant towards workforce housing. And then we are asking the budget some funds for public art. These are the just the pedestals to put sculptures and other public art at the Gateway Park of the Handy Transportation Hub, and then also perhaps in conjunction with the demonstration garden here at City Hall, putting in the sculpture too. We've had a council goal. We've been working with the council, and we have a work session coming up on public art and how we can advance that program. And one of the things that I think we can easily do to encourage that is to kind of set the stage, right? So put in the pedestals, have the opportunity to then go and recruit artists through a more formal program or rotating exhibit, gallery without walls type of program that we can have a little more sculptures in town. And I think the Gateway Park is a great spot with that new pathway that goes around, and you have 5 or 6 key locations that people can walk and be large part of that project. So those are the proposed projects. This is the updated project list that we had shared with the board a few weeks ago on how we're looking in terms of spending that 6.68 million remaining maximum indebtedness through 2030. So the bulk of that, half of that will go towards the Adams Avenue project, but there still is some other funding that would be available for other projects. We might have that catch all at the bottom there, about 200,000 that would be, over above what we need to go and finance and do that into other projects. So there's other opportunities of doing things like building hardening in our downtown or technical assistance for different spaces and things like that in downtown, or other, technical and assistance programs or loans with maybe dark skies and other things that we could do. And then other ideas that the board may have over the next 5 years. But the major one, like I said, will be Adams. And then, the West Side Pump Station 2 is carrying over to be funded this year. So that's your urban renewal agency budget. There's 2 funds. So just the technical part of the presentation is that there's 2 funds. There's the Urban Renewal Debt Service Fund. So basically, this is the fund that accounts for how we pay off the debt that we need to issue to do the nuts and bolts of renewal projects. And then the Urban Renewal Project Fund is basically where you find the capital improvements budgeted. So this is also we also put in the Renewal Project Fund, we'll transfer in the loan proceeds. That is that financing that we're proposing to do next fiscal year. Probably just a private placement to get a loan to get that $4.1 million to fund these projects. And then the debt service fund pays the debt on that loan. And then 3.9 in capital improvements is basically this project list. Except for the M&S has what's it now? Workforce housing or
For this year, the workforce housing.
yeah.
Yep. And technical assistance.
Yeah. Any questions? It's your USA Urban Renewal 101 and
Pretty good. You need to do a class.
yeah.
Do a right class.
For clarification, kick me if I'm wrong, right, there is no actual funds sitting in here at this time. This is the amount of money that we can incur debt on.
Yeah,
We don't have that $6 million sitting somewhere in a little secret slush fund we're gonna start shoving in, and the other budget, those were dollars that we knew were there. This is anticipated expenditures for which you have to have anticipated debt.
That's right. We do have some beginning fund balance. So it's that 6.68 is a combination of, yeah, how much that we can go and issue debt and pay off that debt with the tax increment. Plus, we've kind of built up about 1.1 or so in fund balance to spend on projects.
So you see these big numbers. Some of it is smoke and mirrors until it's actually mirrors.
Clear as mud.
Yeah. That is the end. Yeah, that's it. It's a small but mighty agency.
Any discussion or questions about, dollar amounts, how this works, make you feel comfortable with it?
What's the structure of the loan, like get loans to this process, like? Pay off, just ready, what is this typically look like?
Yeah, so this will more than likely be a conventional loan because believe it or not, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money for some bigger banks or URAs. So, the advantage we have is we have, $550,000 a year. So, when you have only a $4 million loan, you can pay that off quite quickly. So for the first few years, you put in, you have to have a coverage of debt ratio for that. So you're kind of limited on what you can spend, but we would then again make sure that we can pay that loan off early. Because after 2030, once we commence or finish those projects, that's all we're going to be doing with URA. So that's the sole mission will be to pay off that debt. And then the agency will be done. And that increment will go back out to those overlapping agencies. In terms of interest, that'll just kind of probably be tied to whatever the rate is, at the time we procure financing. So, this last year we were anywhere from 5.5% to I think 6.5%, which I expect us to be similar, in a similar spot for this upcoming financing.
Yeah, and what one of the unknowns is just more downtown development. There's actually some projects that have been approved but haven't broken ground or anything yet. But back to that, the map, but also the assessed value. So that 550 is based on this assessed value. You get a couple, more commercial developments downtown. That tax increment is going to go up, right? It's going to continue to go up more than 3% and could go up quite a bit more, which means we could just pay off that debt even earlier.
Yeah. Which doesn't do much other than really benefit the overlapping agencies to get their money back quicker.
Including
Including us.
Do you know what the impact is to the city?
The city, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think it is, I could find that out.
It's probably at least 6 figures.
Yeah. Close to that.
So in 2030, we can't dig out anymore debt.
Correct.
The projects can be finished by 2030.
No, we started.
You can start by 2030.
Yeah.
And then it just, as long as it's paid off. And we're still. After 2030, we're still getting increment funding until the loan paid off, and then that's, so there's like a hard date when the already dissolves. It's just based on when.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's $100K. 100,000. That's the city sacrifice, the city itself. And like school district is 155,000, just to kind of put in perspective. Deschutes County is 48,000, so a lot of these overlapping districts will benefit tremendously from that going away.
Is this a one-time deal or can we create another agency?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can,
Great one tomorrow if people go along with it.
yeah.
That's right. I mean, the rules have changed about establishing a renewal. They change quite often because the overlapping taxing district issues. Fire districts are notoriously nervous about them. But we have pretty good relations with our other districts. But that's all part of the process, having those conversations, talking about the plan, what projects could be accomplished, including other public agencies in all of those projects. But you do need to now get their approval for those. Any other questions?
So thinking out loud, it's gonna be that question, so. Just to circle back to the. Bruce, village green. Village green is something you already. We could use URA dollars. On that.
Yeah, and we have in the past, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Not saying we should, I was just trying to understand it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments before we entertain a motion?
Or public comment period.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody on.
There's not.
So
Then before, we have another one?
it's different, it's for urban community.
No, there was, we had it before, I redirected to
Oh.
Director O'Neill. We redirected to manager Wheeler. But there was no one on.
There is no
There's
com-
no one.
yeah.
Okay,
Down here. And just, not to put anybody on the spot. But I want to be sure that our new budget committee members, if you have any questions about this, don't be afraid to ask, there are no stupid ones, this is kind of a little different thing to wrap your head around. And so, don't be afraid to pop up if you got it. Even as a person who's been doing this for a long time, I'll still sometimes do just a touch confused. Which is David.
Heard all my questions, this is my fifth year doing this.
You guys have been asking great questions, I must say, so the great question work to learn. Really is.
then, I'd really love to entertain a motion.
I move the budget committee approve property taxes for fiscal year 2025-26 for the Sisters Urban Renewal Agency to be derived through the division of tax in the amount of $550,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion passes. Great, let's entertain another motion.
I move the budget committee of the Sisters Urban Renewal Agency approve the budget for fiscal year 2025-26 in the amount of $6,005,151.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Great, motion passes. All right, take care of the meeting.
Rapid hard and loud.
Yeah.
Not yet.